All right, testing. Anybody hear me? Ah, finally. Okay, Paul is coming. He's getting his papers ready, so we will start. I'm so sorry about that. I'm going to start you over then, too.
Can they hear?
Yep.
Good morning again. I was quite brilliant this morning for the first 15 minutes. Unfortunately, none of you could hear me. So hopefully everybody's hearing. We've had to change computers. I did get a new computer for my desk, and for some reason that one's acting up this morning. So I'm down at Amber's computer, and welcome. We'll get underway, and we may run over a few minutes, but glad you're here. This is what we did last time. We contrasted the old and the new, went through hiring, orientation, probation, and delegation. And I had asked a question for the chat box, which I didn't get any response to since nobody could hear me, but we used an analogy of a vehicle and another of a food thing. And what were those two? They're memory devices. See if anybody can chat in. We'll also test our sound here. Shannon's typing. Okay, one was Deb is get on the bus. Yes, there were 4 things on the bus, though. One was get the right people on the bus. Then get on the bus, get the wrong people off the bus, get people in the right seats on the bus, and decide where to drive the bus. Shannon says she can't think of the food thing. Well, think of Thanksgiving, Shannon. What's the dessert usually in Thanksgiving? Is a pie. And the analogy we used was a small piece of the pie and then the whole pie. And the point being, if you're a manager, you need to get the small piece fully under control before you too much work done in the operational piece. Anyway, that was last time. Now today, we're going to talk about empowerment, evaluation, termination, layoffs, training and motivation. So let's start with empowerment. So in contemporary management, empowerment is one of the most important of management skills, but it's also the hardest to learn. And I found it for myself since I try to practice everything I teach in these courses. As we talked about last time, the old model was built on the industrial model with clear policy procedure manuals, which are kind of mandates. Now today we still have policy and procedure manuals, but they're more designed as help manuals, and that's a big shift. So in the new management approach, we want to bring our brain to work, and that's what people want, and it's much more productive. So this has all come about through the industrial age. So it looks a little bit like this. The old organization, very direct in a one-on-one management structure. Now you still want your org chart and you still have some of that, but the new organization looks much more like the diagram below. It's much more fluid. And that's empowerment. Now, empowerment, much easier said than done. let's try to illustrate this a number of ways and see if we can. This is one of the hardest things actually to teach. You really have to experience it. So here's two birds. They're in a cage, but the door of the cage is open. So the question is, why are those birds still sitting there? And if Amber can hear me, Amber, I lost my chat box, so I'm trying to ask, why are those birds sitting? I wonder, here we go, I've got the chat box back. So I've empowered these birds, I've empowered your staff, but they're still there. They're not leaving. In the hundreds and hundreds of people who have taken this course, I've yet to find anybody that has birds, so I don't get a good response there. Well, let's take another. Oh, good. Deb, that means we've still got sound. They're used to what they know. There's some truth in that. Willing to reach out. But take a look at this. Here's the rest of that cartoon. Here's the cat sitting on the sofa below. And if you can think of the analogy, that's the manager. So the manager says, I'm empowering you, but then the question is the manager really doing this? So let me illustrate this with two stories. We decided at one point in my firm to get away with the penny cash account. Anybody could spend up to $500. So after a week or two of this, my office manager came in with a brand new chair. Now, not any chair, it was a pricey $450 chair. And what went through my mind, I walked in the front door and saw this new chair. Well, you know, how much you pay for that? $450. I think I saw it at Costco at $275. I don't know whether I would have picked that color. I don't know whether I would have picked the features that but if you're trying to empower, all those questions are irrelevant. And I've got a very empowered staff, but you have to and learn how to do it. Here's another example. So how many spaces after period? Let's get this in the chat box. Oh, I see Amber's got my, okay, here, Amber put it up. How many spaces after period? So go ahead and vote, 1 or 2. I wonder if this technology is working because I don't see anybody voting. Let me try this a different way. Oh, there they are. Okay, we got some of you with 1 and some of you with 2. Well, the modern technology says if you stick with 2, choose the old typewriter version. If you're in the computer, you go with 1 space. So I get a new secretary, and the question is how many spaces after a period, and she's very adamant that it needs to be 2. Now, from an empowerment point of view, I sit back a little bit. We're very high on training here. She goes off to an advanced Excel training session and comes back in the office, a big smile on her face, and says, guess what the instructor, one of the first things the instructor talked about, how many spaces after a period? And she said, I think we'll start at 1. that's what empowerment's all about. So sometimes empowerment, you just need to sit back a little bit. Let's look at it in cartoon fashion. Going crazy with my technology this morning. Love this cartoon. Wait, listen to me. We don't have to be just sheep. And that's what you're. Here's the cartoon I wanted to share. What'll you have? We'll have 2 beers. Wait a minute. You always order for me. Why can't I ever order for myself? Okay, what'll you have? Well, let's see. Now, if you're watching these, you're probably way ahead of me. Thinking. I think I'll have a beer. Okay, the end result here is exactly the same, but the impact on the employee is quite different. I find when I empower staff, they generally come up with a much better idea than I would have had. So I've just had to learn to sort of bite my tongue, sit back a little bit. Doesn't mean I'm passive, that I never enter the discussion, but how you do that becomes very important, and that's learning empowerment. But I've been hoping to be trained as a tack dog, but so far it's just sit, stay, and fetch. I've been hoping to be empowered, but so far it's just sit, stay, and fetch. The supervisor released her control over a subordinate for just a while to let him lead. She learned that letting go of control at times is a good way to work together better. This was out of our monthly cartoon contest, and although Kathy James, who submitted this was not a winner, but I gave her a special prize because I thought this was fantastic. And it not only makes the point about empowerment, it makes the point about women as managers also. So I thought it was fantastic. Let's look at this the way Sam Walton looked at it. Famously rich and deceased founder of Walmart. He was teaching a class of students. Student, what's your secret? How did you become the richest man in America? Walton, it's easy, right decisions. But how? How do you know the right decisions? Walton, that's experience. Student, then, well, how do you get experience? Walton, that's the easiest part of all, the wrong decisions. If an employee makes a mistake, that employee will never be disciplined or criticized by a manager as long as the mistake was made in the interest of the customer. This is out of the Southwest Airlines manual for employees. And those of you that have flown Southwest Airlines will recognize how that takes place in the real world. Now, there will be cases where the manager needs to override the staff. But the key here is with plenty of pre-consultation. You don't go to a meeting with the city manager and override the staff. You want to have staff with you in that meeting if there's going to be an override. So be very careful about that. Empowerment does not mean abandoning responsibility. People gain responsibility in individual jobs, but the manager still has some responsibility to know what is going on, set the direction for the department, make the decisions they can, ensure that people are on course, offer a guiding hand, open doors to clear the way, and assess performance. You focus on the what and less on the how. And people want to be heavily involved in the how. Excuse me, I'm fighting a cold this morning. Being at a different desk, I had to go find a Kleenex box. But so focus on this what and less on the how. And the what, of course, is that northbound train that we talked about in our first session. So empowerment can be defined. Oh, let me see if I can draw something here. I'm not too good with this technology on this, but let's see what I can do. There are two ways I like to conceptualize this. One would be, here's a box. Think of this as a box. And within this box, the employee is empowered. So the employee is making decisions. Think of the yellow, that's the northbound train. So the employee is empowered so long as they're working within that context. Now, some people have taught this too, they don't like the box notion, so we tried a little different to illustrate this. This is the old paddle with a ball on rubber strings, and so the ball's going out here, and that's your empowered employee going out here, like this, but it's always coming back here, and this is your northbound train. So this is just an additional way to think about empowerment. So empowerment, you set the direction, you give autonomy, and then you give support. And support includes feedback as necessary. And then finally, you'll remember this from earlier. So this is the empowerment structure. So here's your staff up here that you've empowered. And here's you down here, and you're providing the support up here. That's what empowerment's all about. See if anybody got any questions on empowerment here. Type them in before we move on. Very, very important. As I say, you'll find this is hard to learn, but once you learn it, boy, the productivity of your staff goes way up, and you can focus on areas you should be focusing on. Think about this, and we'll come back to it with questions as we get time. Let's move on to employee evaluation. Now, this topic is changing considerably. I'd like to do, if I can come up with some surveys. Let's see, let me back up with this technology. Should be right here. I've got 3 questions here. Does your organization have annual employee evaluations? Yes or no? Are surveys routinely done on time? Yes or no? And do you like doing them? Yes or no? And we'll see whether this is going to come up. Hope we're still on, and you can go ahead and vote if you would, please. Okay, let's take a look. So most of you do have employee evaluations. We got 69% here. Are the surveys routinely done? I don't know if Amber, is this being shared or not? Can you all see these scores? Apologize again for this technology. Yeah, okay, you can see them. Our surveys routinely done about 46%, and do you like doing them? No is the highest one. Now it's interesting, as we travel around the country in our consulting, we usually see that surveys are being done, or places have an evaluation system, but they're really not being done, and we usually suggest they start getting done. And then, do you like doing them? We don't find a lot of people that like doing them. Now, the noted management consultant Edward Deming suggested that we do away with annual evaluations. They tend not to be productive and don't really lead to improved performance. I'm pretty close to having the same thoughts, and the current literature in HR circles is beginning to question, particularly the evaluations as we've seen them in the past. My last government planning job, we had a standard kind of evaluation form where you rank the employees above standard, etc. And I started saying from now on, every employee is going to be rated above standard unless it's somebody that we're really trying to terminate. That worked well for a while until HR discovered what I was doing and they made me stop it. So I had to come up with a different idea. Evaluation is important. We want to set high performance goals for people. We want to communicate clearly our expectations. We want to monitor projects but delegate responsibility. In other words, here's the empowerment piece. Then we've got to have feedback. And feedback's not about filling out forms. Feedback delayed is feedback denied. And giving people a raise isn't the same as giving feedback. And many notions these days about evaluation is we want to separate the money side from the evaluation side. If your manager stinks at giving feedback, and many managers do, then it doesn't matter how hard you try to deliver feedback, it's going to stink. If you hate performance reviews or think you've become stale in your organization, then the only remedy is to improve the coaching skills of your management. And this phrase is very operative. Please shut up. If the manager is doing most of the talking in the evaluation session, you know that it's not going too well. Some of the private sector, they're evaluating employees on a much more frequent basis. And we've got a lot of private companies now simply avoiding or eliminating the standard evaluation. Here's something that just came out in the recent HR magazine. Oh, excuse me. One person is talking for more than half the review and faces. Unlike to be an employee, it's not a conversation, it's a lecture. So keep that in mind. Focus your people on what they are best at, and I like that phrase, rather than trying to fit them into a square box. Now, there's a whole new thing out called career conversations, and this is what it looks like. Now, these are questions you would use in a career conversation. This would replace the standard evaluation form. You've been in this role for X amount of time. What are the pros and cons of you in this role? Are there any responsibilities you'd like to try that you haven't? What do you see as the next step? Does the work of any other department interest you? Are there concerns about pay or the middle top being clogged? Are you aware how promotion decisions are made here? How do you think you could grow? And where do you want to be in 12, 18, 24, 36, 36 months? You can see the difference between this and the standard evaluation form. Now, there's another way to approach this, and I've done this many years ago after my HR department stopped me in what I was doing. And I said, let's try a different approach. And we used a self-evaluation form. And I believe this is in my ABZ's book, but let's take a quick look at it. So it looked like this. The employee filled out the evaluation. It had 18 questions. Here's just a start. And the employee filled out. This was the focus of the annual sit down with the employee. But I want to look at, enlarge 3 of the questions, which were very critical questions. What are a few things your supervisor in the department does to help you do your job? What does your supervisor in the department do that hampers you? And what additional things can your supervisor in the department do to help you do your job? And you see the whole evaluation takes on a totally different approach. We found that very helpful. Whatever your system, you must evaluate. You do not have the right to call yourself a manager if you're not regularly telling your people what they're doing well and how they need to improve. Keep your eye on the literature for here because it's really changing rapidly as HR people are beginning to see things differently. Then it's particularly difficult to evaluate managers. And some of you may see that. You may feel that your boss's city manager, whoever, just doesn't have the data for a good evaluation. So here's where the 360 evaluation comes in. These are confidential evaluations done by peers, subordinates, maybe other managers. And this can be a very effective way of evaluating managers. And if you're interested in this topic, pull it up on the internet, you'll find a lot of literature on 360 evaluations. Some of the literature on these, I happen to be positive. I think they can be very important. One final story in evaluation. When I was Tucson planning director, I had a lot of problems with the mayor of Tucson. And this ended up being a news article. The mayor called, I guess he looked up Paul Zucker in the phone book. There happened to be a student at the university with the name Paul Zucker. And he went on glowing about something very positive that I had done. The press got a hold of this and wondered why the person let the mayor go on so long. And the student said, it's been such a long time since anybody had said anything nice to me that I was just enjoying the fact that you thought I had done something well. Well, the interesting thing about that story, even after it hit the newspaper, I never did get a second call from the mayor. So that's what evaluation's all about. Okay, now let's go on to termination. Now in our work, most managers say that it's almost impossible to terminate somebody in their organization. And in my experience, it is very difficult. But to keep misfits in jobs they cannot do is not being kind, it's being cruel. Oh, let's do a quick survey here. Have any of you ever terminated an employee? go ahead and vote. Have you ever terminated an employee? Now, some of you in very small organizations, I assume maybe you haven't, but I'm curious to see. All right, let's see how the voting's going here, Amber. Well, it's a little higher than I thought. So we got 46% of you have, in fact, terminated an employee. You don't do anyone a favor by keeping them in the wrong job. Some of my closest friends are people I terminated. How can that be? Well, let's go back to the bus analogy. I got them, or the northbound train, I got them on the right train earlier in their career, and they maybe weren't best friends when I terminated them, but they quickly realized that I actually did them a favor by moving things along. Here's a little cartoon fashion. I think you'd be much more valuable asset to us if you work for a different corporation, different department, different city. We've seen some cities and counties that take a poor performing employee and just keep shuffling them department to department. That obviously we don't support, but if they can be more effective, one of the people I terminated ended up moving over into the park department and was much happier in that kind of a situation. Here's another cartoon. You're next. So what does an HR department and attorney say you need to do in relation to termination? Let's get you in the chat box on this. So what advice do they give you? And I'll try to type out a few of those words. What do they say you need to do? You want to fire somebody. Okay, document is one. Let's see if we can come up with another. Document, so far everybody's on documentation. Let's see what else we can come up with. Counsel, okay, good. Performance improvement plan, I like that. Sorry, the spelling here this morning. See if we can come up with clear expectations, okay. Okay, those are good, and those are part of it. What we usually see also is document. We got a lot of that counseling, some evaluation, and then progressive discipline. Well, these are all good, but will this result in a bloodless termination, what we call a bloodless termination? And it's probably going to be a messy termination. So today I'm going to teach you a different approach. It's a three-step process. We could put 3 steps on here. And the first thing you need to come up with, let's see if we can get it in the chat box. It's an A word. First step, it's an A word. What would come to your mind if you're working on a termination? Assess, okay, we had that. Yes, Chris, Mark, assess. Still not the A word I'm looking for. Let's see if we got any more. AG, see if that triggers any bells. Okay, here it is, agree. Very important word. Now, you notice a lot of the prior stuff we were doing in termination was you talking to the employee. But now this is a little different. This is a mutual conversation, and this is agreeing on the problem. Now, what's the second step is another A word. See if we can come up with the second step. Anybody want to type this in? Second step, so we're going to agree on the problem. A, good, Shannon, agree on the solution. Fantastic. And then, again, this agree word, very important piece of this. And the third step, as you might guess, is and Chris came up with an A word, act. Let's put that word in the third step would be agree on the consequences. Now, if in fact you do this, what should happen is this. You agree on the problem, you agree on the solution, you agree on the consequences. If you get these agreements, these aren't easy, by the way. This may take, particularly here, this may take you some time to get this worked out. If you're moving down this, and you do all these, by the way, all three at once. If you're moving down this and the employee is not performing the way you agreed on, often they will self-terminate. And now this can be used for progressive discipline as well as for termination. I've had a lot of students give me feedback later on after taking this course that they've used this system and they find it works very well. All right, that was the termination. Now, if anybody's got any questions on that, give this a try. Just give it a try for progressive discipline and give me some feedback and see how it works. Okay, let's go to training. Now, I call it the secret investment. What we see is training and planning departments a national disgrace. Departments across this country are spending too little money, too little time, too little know-how. And then we wonder why we're getting poor decisions or lack of performance. And we need to know that education is a lifetime responsibility. It doesn't end when you get your college degree. This needs to go on and on. So the question we raise is, what % of the personnel budget should be spent on training and what % of employees' time? And I've got two surveys here. Let's start with the % of the budget. So what % of the budget, this may be a little tricky for you that aren't heavily into your budget, but go ahead and vote anyway, where you think it would be anywhere from 0.2% of the personnel budget to 2.5%. Okay, let's see how you came up on this one. Okay, and we have a real mix here, meaning this was probably a hard one for a lot of you to answer. Let's go on to the second one on the time, % of employee time. This might be a little easier for you to think about if you have a 40-hour week. So here's the kind of time you'd be spending on training. Go ahead and vote. We'll pull these up. Those of you who have read my book should know these. We push this pretty hard. We push this in all of our studies also. Okay, so we got 1 to a mix again. This is where we're at, 5%. Now, it's not a perfect measure, but we use this in all of our studies to help push this along with the elected officials. So 5% of employees' time and 1.5%, 2% of the personnel budget. I actually like 2%. It's not unusual when we do our studies that this number will be point something, much, much lower than the more change you're undergoing in an organization, the higher these numbers need to be. But this will give you a little rule of thumb you can use as you get in negotiations with finance for your city manager. And so when you get done with this course today, why don't you go back and calc these for yourself and see what they look like in your organization. Then you ought to have an annual training program. Now, John Gardner, the author of Self-Renewal, said, don't set out in life to be an interesting person. Set out to be an interested person. He said one of his goals to learn as much between the age 70 to 88 as he learned between birth and age 18. Learning people learn until the day they die, not because learning will get them somewhere, but because they see learning as a part of the reason for living. It's interesting, when I was San Diego County Assistant County Administrator, we pushed for a 30-hour management training course, which I ended up later as a consultant teaching. When this was presented to the Board of Supervisors, some of the more conservative members said, why are we going to pay to have our managers trained? We hire trained managers and they shouldn't need additional training. Well, that doesn't fit with most professions. Here it is in golf. Divas do it, golfers do it, pilots do it, violinists do it, sprinters do it, soldiers do it, surgeons do it, astronauts do it. And if you're an AICP member, you do it and you'll get credit for this course. So it's a continuing kind of program training. Here's something I call a training table. This will be in your handout. These are different things I've used, and some are more organized than others. So this would just be your, if I can get this to work here. My technology's driving me crazy this morning. So higher education, that's your degrees, and you may, some of you that just have your bachelor's, I'd encourage you to go ahead and get your master's degree, or maybe even post-work. Then most places have tuition reimbursement these days, very important. Now, local colleges often have courses you can pick up and then hire a professor. When I was Marin County Planning Director, we were near Berkeley, and we could go over and approach a professor who could come over in off hours and teach the course right within our department, and fairly inexpensively. A good technique. In books and magazines, I like putting your people into a reading club, having them do reports. Book reports could be part of a staff meeting. then there's some good DVD and audio tape. Particularly got a good one on customer training you might want to look at. You can do training staff meetings and retreats. I like to say a little bit of training in every staff meeting, then short courses. Visiting other agencies, we don't find planning departments doing this, but I highly recommend it. Taking a half day, a full day, and go to see another agency and see how they do things. If you're a big organization, you need a training officer. Going to conferences is good. Training each other, job rotation, cross-training, help manuals, checklists, lunches, breakfast. Now, OJT training, very important. By the way, for front counter activities, I've got a technique I like, which is pull your staff together at the end of the last 10 minutes of the day, compare notes as what's gone on today, and that's really a training kind of thing. Train the trainer programs, computer training, coaching, mentoring, customer visits. These are all things that you might think about in putting together your training program. Now, a couple other ideas here. This is called the mobility circle. And so we put, let's see, I'm going to have to type this in. Get my typing together here. Okay, we put mobility. That's mobility. I'm sorry, we got a V and it's not well placed, but think of this as mobility on one side. And on this side, we have competence. Now, it used to be that if you were competent, we would give you mobility. But this theory is a little different. This theory says through mobility, we will build your confidence. Good thing to think about. Now let's look at it in the real world. Let's say this is a typical planning department. You've got 4 layers in the department and 3 divisions. This might be advanced planning, current planning, front counter, whatever you want to call them. Now let's look at, and some of you are fairly young in this course, so this is a good one for you to look at. So say you start here, and you do all right here, and you move up here. Here's another advancement. Then you move up here, another advancement, and eventually you end up here, you're planning director. Now that's one way to proceed. Let's take a second way. You're here, and you take a lateral promotion or lateral move over to here. Then you move up to here, and then maybe you move to here, and now you move up to here as planning director. So I guess I don't have a survey here, but let's see in the chat box. So using our notion of mobility and competence, where do you think you're building the most confidence, on the yellow line or the red line? See if anybody wants to take a position here in the chat box. Amy says the red line. Yeah, the red line. Most of you are saying the red line. This happened to me, for better or worse. I moved around a lot in my career, different levels, went from cities, counties, regional organizations, and I think all of that helped me build my confidence. Now, for one of my contracts, a large organization, 125-person organization, They had 30 vacancies to be filled, and we found that a lot of the existing staff were not well trained. So we came up with something we call this training table. Now, you can't do this precisely this way, but I want you to see this as a possible methodology. So this is what we did. We lined things up. These were the most complex items at the top. These were the simpler items at the bottom. Now, you don't have to agree with all of these, but you can see where with research, lot line, subdivision, variances, use permits. Eventually, we got up into doing plans. Then, we looked at the staff and the new employees, and we set how long are you going to be on each one of these, and we moved them up the ladder. Now, you probably don't have time or can't do this precisely the same way, but I think you can take this conceptually and work with it. Then a few cautions about training. Abilities versus motivation. When we find problem employees, it's usually not abilities, it's the motivation that's the issue. Personality, you can't change the adult personality, so you got to be careful there. Baking the cake or frosting it. What I mean by this, if you have somebody with a fundamental writing problem, I don't think you can solve that just through a in-house course frosting the cake. That person may need to go back to university and take some fundamental writing courses. Then we want to look at results and retrain as necessary. Remember, everybody's in it together. Now, grazing, it's not unusual an HR department will post different courses and people graze around and pick those up. Some of that's right, but what I would like to see is a little bit more organized way of looking at your training program. Then planning commission training is also important, and we do have in a variety of states. This slide may be not 100% up to date, but when I did it, this is what we found, and these were states that had mandatory training for planning commissioners. Okay, that's training, very important topic. Now let's go to motivation. Now motivation, as you will see, is very closely related to empowerment. Do it through cartoon fashion first, how to motivate employees. Any of the divisions not showing a profit. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Mr. Gregg, who will be heading up our new incentive program. Obviously, this is the old view of motivation. Now, I like to approach this through something called anxiety streams. Paul Tillich, who was a theologian, came up with these. And the idea here was anxiety can be negative. And so he had three ways to deal with anxiety. One was dealing with guilt. One was dealing with the concept of death, and one dealing with the sense of purpose. Now, we're not going to deal with this one or this one, but this one we think can be useful for motivation inside your organization. A few cartoons on sense of purpose. What does it all mean? Don't ask me, I just work here. Do you ever feel like a character in a very dull TV show? I forgot why I came to work today. Who am I and what am I doing here? And of course, what we're after here is clarity in the northbound train. The other thing to think about in motivation are the different generations. And here they are. And this is something you may want to study a little bit, but you can see over here, this is the key, what their core values are, and then what kind of rewards they want, and then what's their interactive style. If we get time, or some of you want to stay a few minutes late, we'll to personality test today, so you can talk about these style questions. But as you can see, wherever your employees are, wherever you are on this scale, there's a good chance these are the ways you interact. So there are clear generational differences. So in your recruiting, your team building, your dealing with change, your motivation, managing, all of these relate to this. And then one of the questions, of course, is money. Oh, excuse me, here's your younger people. This is a good slide. This will be in your handouts also. And we added this, Amber, so make certain this gets in the handout that goes out after the course. But for those of you with the younger staff members, which is a lot of your new staff, this is it right here in a summary fashion. How's money fit into this? Do you see money as a main motivator? Let's do a little survey on this. How many of you see money as a main motivator? Go ahead and vote. We get a lot of different opinions on this. So is money a main motivator? That's the topic we're dealing with, motivation. Let's go ahead and see how the vote goes. And well, it doesn't surprise me. A lot of you feel it is a main motivator. What I want to show you is, well, I don't agree with that, first of all. There, damn it, are you motivated now? We could double the salary of all your employees right now, and I think it has very little to do with motivation. I like the way Harvard Business Review did this. This is an old chart, but recently they republished it in the Harvard Business Review. And the title of the article was, Tell Me Again How to Motivate. And here it is. And what they did, you'll see a line that runs down the middle of this. They said, these are motivational factors. These are demotivational factors. So in the motivational side, achievement, recognition, work itself, responsibility, advancement, growth. Where's money? Here's salary. Okay, now you can see salary was a motivator for some people, but a small one compared to all the rest. And for some people, it can be a demotivator, and that's when you start comparing yourself to others. You can put together a whole motivation program right off of this chart. Very effective. Then there are two kinds of motivation. There's extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic comes from the outside, and intrinsic is from the inside, your natural wanting to do something. So here's extrinsic. So money would be extrinsic. Pats on the back would be extrinsic. Those kinds of things. And I'm not saying you don't use those, but much less effective than intrinsic motivation. And intrinsic motivation comes from the inside. Now here's the latest theory on this, and this is really a good summary of motivation. Now when I was teaching the 30-hour management course, we actually spent about 3 hours just on motivation, going through all the motivational theories. But the interesting thing is the new research on motivation. Using the new theories and intrinsic motivators, people basically motivate themselves. And these are the features of motivating yourself. You have control over your job. You're empowered. You're acquiring new skills. That's the training we were just talking about. Part of a team. We haven't said much about this, but this could be, go back to your Northbound train. and then concern for standard of excellence, and that's evaluation. So those are high motivational things. Now, let's do a quick little survey and see which one of those you tend to use the most. Or which one do you find most motivational for you, maybe is a good. Okay, let's vote. Let's see how that vote comes up. Okay, so control over one job is fairly high, which I find very useful. And then concern for standard of excellence, I would expect to see that with a bunch of planners. Let me go back to that slide a minute, the prior slide. Oops, let me see, here we go. Now, I hope I use all of these, but this one I think is really powerful, and that's the one that goes with empowerment that we're mostly talking about today. Here's another way to look at motivation. You have an attitude. Everybody has some kind of an attitude. So you put in a stimulus, this could be a directive, and you get a response out of it. So the stimulus hits the attitude, and then you get a response. Where does this response come from? And there are two items, if anybody wants to try this in the chat box. What's impacting the employee's attitude? You're trying to get a certain kind of, so you're trying to understand his attitudes can be very important. See if I've still got some of you with me and we can figure out what would go in these two boxes. Okay, motivation, stress level, yeah, both of those could be part of this. Well, the theory talks about experience and environment. Now, certainly motivation could be part of the environment. Stress level could be part of the environment. Atmosphere could be part of the environment. This one is probably relatively fixed, but this is the one you have great control over, and that's what you're telling me in your chat box. So the stress levels, the atmosphere, motivation here comes up, impacts the person's attitude, and that impacts the kind of response that's going to come out of this. It's called the attitude box. Another interesting way to look at motivation. Okay, we're about done talking about motivation. Now I like to throw this in because I wish I'd found this much earlier in my career. The question here is, well, do you have stars? I'm not going to do a survey here, but think about it. Do you have stars in your organization? And hopefully some of you think of yourself as a star. But as a manager, wouldn't it be nice if we could have a lot more stars in our organization? This is a great little book, by the way. You might want to pick it up. So the authors of this came up with 9 things that stars, and here they are. And they're sort of in the order of importance, but particularly if you read the book, bingo, this is the most important for stars. Stars may be doing a good job in their job description, but they take initiative outside of the job descriptions. So they make connections. They make connections into other departments, into the community, what have you. So if you want to be a star, I would begin to focus on this one. Now, you might want to do all the rest of these also, but here's the big one. And Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Some of you are familiar with that book. It's interesting what he said. He said, in the last analysis, the most important and most difficult of all the habits, the first one, be proactive. Here it is. Take the initiative, or in Steve Covey's terms, be proactive. Well, we've done a pretty good job of catching up here, which I'm happy to say. Now, the last thing I sometimes do is put you in do a personality test with you. Let's start by saying how many of you have had a personality test. Let's do a little survey on that. All right, let's see how your vote on this is, if you've had a personality test or not. Okay, well, quite a few of you have. Now, if you want to stick with me, we'll do another one here. Now, the one I like to use is a very simple one, and the thing I like about it is it's so simple that you can after this course you can probably do the personality test of your manager without the manager knowing it, or your elected official, using this test. Now, it's not perfect, but I find it's really a pretty simple and useful test. So get a piece of paper handy, and we'll do this quickly. And keep in mind, there's no one best personality. The reason we want to know people's personality is it helps us figure out how to relate to them, and it gives you some insight to yourself as well. So on your piece of paper, draw a line, a horizontal line like this, and on that line, put whether you're more direct or indirect. So wherever you are, just put a spot on that line, direct or indirect. This will give you an idea what we mean by these two, whether you're indirect or, so indirect's to the left, direct's to the right on your line. Okay, has everybody got that? Now, let's do a vertical line. And the same thing. This is where you're pretty open. You're going to score up here. If you're more self-contained, you're going to score down here. I'll give you descriptions here also. This is the open and self-contained. Get yourself on that line. Then this will put you on one of the quadrants, whether you're a relator, socializer, thinker, director. And I guess, unfortunately, I don't have the slide that shows you exactly which one. But if you're direct, you're going to be obviously down in here. If you're indirect, you're probably going to be more on this side. If you're very open, you're probably going to be up in here as a socializer. So it's just a quick little way to look at things. And if you know where your boss is, in the handout, we'll put in the slide to show you. Well, actually, I don't need the slide. Let me go back. Let me go back just a minute, and then we'll do the survey. If I can back up. So you can do this yourself. So where you're going to be on this line, so the quadrant we're going to get to, so you're going to score on each one of these. So if you scored here and here, you're going to be in this quadrant. If you scored here on the vertical, then here, then you're going to be on this quadrant, etc. Hopefully that's clear enough, because I want to do a test. So think about which of these quadrants you're in, which of these. So are you relator, socializer, thinker, or director? Again, if you hit your line here and you hit it here, you're socializer. If you hit it here and here, you're relator. If you hit it here and here, you're a thinker. Here and here, you're a director. Hopefully everybody's got them located. Now let's just this is just sort of fun. See where you are. Let's go back. Amber, if we can do the survey now. Here we go. So which quadrant are you in? A relator, a socializer, a thinker, or a director? Okay, let's see what this vote looks like. Or not, it's not a vote here, it's simply trying to get some insight. Okay, that's pretty interesting. We have, if we're doing only high-level planning directors, we'd normally get more directors. A lot of thinkers. When we do building inspectors, usually we get a lot of socializers. Again, there's no one right way. I think getting a lot of planners as thinkers, not unusual. Okay, going back. Oops. So here's kind of the summary. The thinker, regimented and rules. So for those of you, this was very high. You want to be careful with this when we get into the empowerment question, because that can be tougher for you. Now, how do you use this? Say that I can think about my boss, city manager, or an elected official, and I can probably think about these in the way that person tends to act and know right away which category they're in. So if they're in the director category and we want to hold a meeting with them or give them a report, how do we do that? Well, our report should be short, should be direct to the, etc., and have clear recommendations. Now, if your manager tends to be a socializer, and I'm going in to meet with them, I might start off by saying, how's your golf game this weekend? see any good movies this weekend, and then gradually get into the material. Now, here you got a very brief short report. If I'm going in to see the thinker, I've got a thick report, I've got all the appendices, the tables, what have you. And all this does is it gives you some insight into how to approach one of these people. So it may not be as sophisticated as some of the bigger evaluators you all have had, but for me, I find this one, it's very easy to use and gets me going very quickly. Okay, let's sum up. Normally we'll break here, but we got just we'll take a few minutes since we were slow getting started. So we talked a lot about empowerment, very important in contemporary management. And this one's going to take you some work. You want to be empowered, we know that. And I think your employees want to be empowered also. And then how do you evaluate? And I recommend you begin to read some of the new evaluation. You can find a lot of this, by the way, on the internet also. You'll see some of the new systems. The one system I showed you today came, I believe, right off the internet. Then termination, if both for terminating and a progressive discipline, a different way to view it, looking at your training program, giving you some shorthand rules for the amount of money and time you should be spending, and the more change you get going in your organization, motivate employees and begin to recognize that empowerment and other techniques can be more effective and then learning how to use personality in your organization. Okay, we've made it. I'm glad to see. Sorry for the technology issues. Let's see if there's one or two questions, though, that you want to raise to wrap this up. Anything we've covered on any of these topics, anything you might differ with on these? So far, I don't see anybody typing. Maybe you've all got your schedules that say at 11 you're out of here. So, okay, so we've got 2 more sessions. I look forward to next Thursday, and we're going to shift gears into sessions dealing much more internally into the department itself. See you next week.